This meeting is being recorded.
Zoom.us.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome
Press CMD Plus to reach the pop-up.
back,
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of our interview with, of course, Brandon Hennis. Joins us right here for the second part of our conversation. So, I think last time we kind of left it up to, we got all the way up to 2010 in your story, and things like that. So why don't you please mute your voice over there?
Yeah, is my voiceover piping through the mixer?
A lot. And why? Sorry, it's okay. So why don't you go from right here and pick up the conversation and start talking about what was going on, from roughly 2010 moving forward. Moving closer and closer to where we are today, and I'll mute and sit back and listen. Go ahead.
Indeed, and we must apologize, folks. For the starters, he asked the voiceover to be muted. What he is mentioning for reference is I had done a prior demonstration and forgot to turn off the computer relay on the mixer, so... Oh, you gotta love your equipment. All right, so anyway, back to business. In 2010, there wasn't a whole lot of, bad things apart from maybe one or two issues that I think they were minuscule, really, if you consider everything else. But a lot of firsts. I got my first cell phone, Samsung Haven. And by this point, I had been a year into my experience with Apple Macintosh computers, by the way. And I forgot to mention that in the last podcast, that in 2009, I had received my very first Mac Mini. I had actually managed through an ex of mine who decided that as a birthday gift I would get a Mac Mini, so that was what that was. In 2010, things were... mostly the biggest issue was moving and dealing with local family stuff and things. So the online factor, there was the bullying that had gone ongoing from 2009 because of a person who apparently, wanted to spread stories. We kind of get through that, and that was a barrier for me for a while because of all the calls, the threats, the continuous onslaught of, we're going to do this to you, we're going to do this to your family, which made me very, very, very carefully cautious, obviously. So I was still on the scene, but I was very protective, obviously, of my welfare. So 2010 was just more or less an ongoing continuation of that, and why I say minuscule, because, I had to register that at the very end of the day, there wasn't a whole lot they could do. It was just another bell in the iron. And then 2011 rolls around. I meet more people, and unfortunately run into more trouble, because people are, unfortunately, you got to be careful who you run into. My family members, 2011 was kind of a tragic year in a lot of ways. In 2011, around the month of June, I had lost my uncle, and we believe, my family, and there's still contention among it, that he was brutally murdered. And we believe this because the way he looked when my mom found him was not the way a person looks when it's natural causes. Let's leave it at that. To put it nicely, she and the coroner and the district attorney in the county were pretty much at odds about the events that unfolded. I should mention, I need to backtrack, and I know there's going to be quite a bit of backtracking, but as you'll recall from the discussion we had last week, last segment, we discussed that I have neurological underdevelopment, so I may get all over the place. I did not mention, I don't think, that during the time that I went through the abuse in 03 and 04, one thing stood out when reporting it in 05. And that one thing was this. It was, if I, as a person, the police department was talked to about it, and their answer was, he's blind, he cannot identify his attacker. Apparently, the moniker at that time was, lack of vision means lack of proof. Except that is not true. I want to remind everybody, as a reminder, this is a caution to anybody. Your vision, or lack thereof, does not define whether you can prove a criminal case. What defines it is whether you can provide evidence that is typically considered proof evident presumption grade. Can you prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that a crime was committed without actually, going and trying to, fabricate evidence or twist stories or add to or take away from? One minute you tell a story, then you change it. Obviously, they're not going to do anything about it. Unless, of course, you have proof that substantiates that evidence. Now, I will say, no, I'm good. I will say this, as we go to 2011, I mentioned we lost my uncle tragically. Now, there were some online bullying incidents that took place, and I had to deal with that accordingly from people who placed a lot of, and it was a lot of them throwing shade at, the autism spectrum, and a lot of them throwing shade at, just the abnormalities of my communication that can sometimes occur. Sure, my communication looks pretty elegant to people when they first read it, but you have to really hang around me on a regular basis to understand. I come up with a lot of silly words. I think everybody's favorite anymore is purper. That's their favorite word. But that one goes back ways. 2011 was a disaster in that respect. Again, tragedy plus bullying equals Brandon not exactly doing his best. Then I fast forward to 2012. Now, 2012 was sort of exactly that. 2012 and 2011, I'm gonna put these in pairs of two for about the next 4 or 5 stanzas here, because one is a continuation of the other for at least the next 2. 2011, 2012. Constant bullying from people that led to me taking, at times, hiatuses offline. And when I didn't take hiatuses offline, I was more or less just messing with audio, doing my usual stuff. 2013, I ended up meeting a very, very sweet young lady who, as you'll hear later, we tragically lose to a brain aneurysm. But this gal had a very, very good knack for love and appreciation. She understood what it was like to be both pushed away and set apart, and she was very awesome, and somebody that has been that was instrumental in kind of giving me that, hey, don't be defined by what happened, define what happens attitude, by living your life your way and not allowing others to sort of confiscate your belief in yourself, or to make you feel less of a person, or to make you feel less of who you are. So 2013, I went through some, trying circumstances. I may mention that 2012 had tragedy too. My Uncle Mike passed away from a heart attack and a stroke during this time. Now, he was another one I looked up to, and he was one of the ones that really taught me that it didn't matter what anybody said. My ability to be me should never be countered with, you can't do it. In fact, he used to get mad when there were people in sighted circles that would say things like, well, with him not being able to see, he has no business trying to walk through a store without some kind of guidance. And my uncle was the one to say, hey, just because he's blind doesn't make him incapable. He just has to do it differently. And my uncle, there's a picture that was taken where he's telling me how to drive a tractor. So he's telling me when to turn, and I turn on cue, like a right-hand turn before we get too close to something, a left-hand turn, and it was amazing. That was taken in 2007. When he had his heart attack in 2012 and we lost him, that was a big blow for me. 2012, we go to western Nebraska. My brother has abandoned, by this point, our family. My younger brother had, because, and this is kind of a very, very and I tell this part of the story because it's important here. He was supposed to be a pallbearer. Some of you, yes, maybe adults, but may not understand the point of a pallbearer in a funeral is that is the pallbearer is the one who helps carry the casket. So it's very important that person be there. And then, of course, if they can't, then they find another pallbearer. But it's hard, especially in circumstances like that. My younger brother left with his then girlfriend, who happened to, unfortunately, be the girlfriend that was originally my uncle's girlfriend. Now, that's a that's a bad genealogical combination right there.
That's crazy.
Going to 2013, I mentioned Heather, the gal that I met. Wonderful lady, very wonderful. We spent a lot of time together. Even through times of me getting bullied by people, we would counter it with just so much fun and humor. Like every time, I told you, it's a victorious train wreck, because for every tragedy, for every trial, something good happens. We had a lot of fun times. I gave her an old Mac of mine that I had kept around for a long time that I'd never give to anybody, but I gave it to her. And I think I even sent her a tablet. Yeah, I did. I sent her a tablet too, a Android tablet, and I was very, very grateful to have done that. But I was more grateful about how happy she was. I'm like, listen, your happiness is what makes me happy, not what I did. I could do that for anybody, but it's seeing your appreciation, and that's my policy always. If I do something for you, I'm happy about your happiness for what I did, not because I'm doing it. Because look, anybody can do anything. But it's whether it's appreciated that makes the biggest difference in the world. So that in mind, 2014, we get to about March, and she tragically passes from a brain aneurysm. And I remember the call well. I'm sitting there listening to a IndyCar race, and I get a phone call that morning. Hey, I need to talk to you about Heather. And I said, what happened? Well, she passed away. 2014 had already gotten off to a bad start because we had some family dynamic issues going on. There were some pretty scary things. But we were living in Blair, Nebraska at the time. And I got to tell you, folks, this Blair, Nebraska was its own story. The landlords didn't understand accessibility and safety for a person totally blind. These two people, they gave us a house that, let's just be honest, for a tornado shelter, being in a downstairs area is okay, unless the way you get there is through a crawl space that has a support beam that you could bang your head on. And this was brought to their attention, but they said, oh, don't worry, there's a way you can get up there without doing it. Now, apparently I am the accident-prone tester of my household, and that was evidenced in May. We'll get to May in a minute, because May was fun. I met a gal named Ashley who lived in Massachusetts at the time, and she was a barrel of fun. We had a lot of laughs, and we had all kinds of fun times. And there's even a story about me going to Dairy Den, which is basically our equivalent to Dairy Queen here in Missouri Valley, where I reside, where I springboard, literally get into the vehicle and springboard across the seats from the right side to the left side, just hammer across the seat, boom, and you have no idea. That was so much fun. Like I just do dumb things just because they're fun. Like it's one of those types of things. Or you grab the wrong ingredient when you're trying to serve up a bowl of food. You put what you think is supposed to be spaghetti in a bowl. It ends up being cream corn. Just dumb things. And then the food tastes good anyway. It's like, well, hey, it wasn't regrettable. Still turned out well. I mean, but things like that. That was at the beginning of the year. From about, April, May onward, until about June. Things started to crumble. Well, literally and figuratively. In 2014, we had the massively infamous hailstorm in Blair, Nebraska. And I say massively infamous because anybody that remembers watching the news knows that then many businesses were damaged. Baseball-sized hailstorm. And people were wonderful and accommodating to me, for one, because while my mom was busy making housing arrangements, I was busy doing a lot of the inspection of damage in the house to let mom know what was wrong. And a lot of people ask, well, how can you do that being totally blind? Well, it's not even just about sense of feel, but you can kind of notice as you walk. Like, does the floor feel stable? Does the atmosphere feel stable? Does the place you're in feel stable? We did, however, encounter that as an issue. It wasn't. The house started falling apart. Ergo, my mom contacting a company that owned the trailer that I now live in. We ended up moving, and we didn't move out of state because of just that. It was also the fact that my mom's health was going bad. My grandmother was really pushing my mom to, be closer to her in case something happened, despite the fact that they really didn't have a very good relationship. The relationship was very strained. Now, during this time, I met a lot of people, but I also ran into a lot of bullying, and one of the most ruthless incidents that could ever occur happened that year. I had entrusted somebody with a Skype account of mine, which was a big mistake of mine, because the main reason I had was because if there was ever trouble or I was ever in the hospital, I wanted people to notify when that happened. I remember this very well, like it was yesterday. I went to go eat dinner. I came back to a message. We would like to inform you that Brandon is dead. You did not hear that wrong. That was the message that was being sent to, and I counted, 47 contacts. 47 contacts. Now I want you to visualize this in your head for just a minute. So imagine me coming back to the dinner table writing, please disregard the message you were sent. This person who was supposed to be trusted decided to break rank, go into my account, and start something. When confronted, her answer was, how else are we going to get people to not take you for granted? And I said, well, what you're actually going to do is it's a good way to get people angry at me. When they find out that I'm alive, but they're not going to recognize you pulling the stunt. They're going to blame me for it. And sure enough, when I come back later on from another lunch the following day, unmute your microphone, we need to talk. I was on a program called TeamSpeak at the time. Quite a confrontation ensued, and me explaining what happened did not end with people being understanding. As usual, and you'll see why as usual comes into play here in a minute. That was met with, well, you see, I don't care. It still happened. And you're still the culprit. Figure that out. I think the only lesson out of that I learned was don't trust everybody, which I already knew, but that was more given proof at that time. So I cut the person off who did it, because quite frankly I didn't feel comfortable with what they were doing. Now, being a licensed ham radio operator, let me add this to the equation. We had a scare with that. At the end of 2015, I met a guy who lived about 45 minutes away from me. Now, for those wondering, how is it possible to be a licensed amateur radio operator totally blind? It's very easy. When you take the ham test, you tell the volunteer examiners that you want no pictures. You want the pictures omitted. Because remember, you cannot answer the questions involving the pictures. There are pictorial questions in the question pool. And as long as you are visually impaired, per ADA and reasonable accommodation, they have to omit the picture if you request it. And so that is a point of interest that I think people probably should be aware of. So if you're feeling like that would be a deterrent from you being a ham radio operator, I encourage you to take a look at a website that I used, which was aa9pw.com. That's the website I used because you can omit pictures and take the practice tests without the pictures. So that's the website I used. And when I studied back in 04, 05, they've had this website around for a while. And Handy Hams was great. Handy Hams was awesome in getting me. They were instrumental in that. So we go to 2015. This guy has hacked into a ham radio repeater and changed the call sign of that ham radio repeater to mine. What do I get in February of that year but a ban and bar from all of the amateur radio repeaters within that area until a consult was had and was sent to the ham repeater coordinator of the state of Nebraska, by which not only was the air cleared, but I later learned that this guy has had a history of framing other ham radio operators that he's gotten connected with. So I was not his first casualty in that respect. They lifted the ban and bar with me and publicly, now I've never had this happen until then, publicly apologized over the air for the injustice done that I had to deal with. That was a rarity. So we go through 2015 unabated, except for an attempt to help somebody went wrong from about June on. It is good to help others in need, but I caution, you should never do that if that person is going to allow themselves to focus on themselves, or, for that matter, be so territorial that they start a fight in your home, leaving your ailing parent having to disband an argument more than once, which is exactly what happened from about 2015 on, at least in the June on to the about middle of, I would say, February, or middle of February 2016. There were bouts of issues with that on and off, arguments that didn't need to happen, people, were not very comfortable. In fact, we had to, our grocery costs, without going into too much specifics, and notice I'm omitting names, and I have a purpose for this, for those that don't understand. When I tell stories about what I go through, I omit names on account of when it comes to people that have done me wrong, for the reason that it doesn't matter who they are. The name is not the problem. It's the action. But also, it's about mutual respect. If you're going to, unless that person is known enough to have committed crimes to the point where they're in a public database and they're already noted, I don't see a need in doing that. Incriminating somebody else, by incriminating yourself to incriminate someone else out of revenge, is not okay. And when you're part of an anti-bully organization, you're also taught how to present things without making the situation less, or shall I say, more damaging to you, but convey the story in a way that indicates that you are a person who's survived varying degrees of trauma. So we'll go to 2016 and end February. We'll end 2015, but not without mentioning that I lost two very dear friends of mine, and I'll mention them by name because these were very influential figures in my life as far as keeping me positive throughout all the struggles I had. Again, I told you, every time something tragic happens, there's something positive. But these two people tragically passed, and the positive is they taught me a lot before they did. One named Karen Idemiller, and she was very amazing, very amazing. Okay, she was like the maternal figure of the online community. Everybody that looked up to her, even though they had a parent, called her mom for some reason, except for me. I was always subservient to the fact that I had a mother. But that was just what they did, because she had that kind of influence. It was like that motherly influence. It didn't matter if you were in trouble or where you were. She was that one that could just basically, she could make it all right again and make you feel like you again, just by talking to you, just listening to her voice. It was just soothing. It was just, there was that type of approach. Everybody that knew her that way. And then our friend Jennifer Weaver, very good friend of ours that we lost, and she was very, unfortunately, was to a stroke, and very humorous. I mean, listen, when you're spending half your time on a call laughing because, well, quite frankly, something that you say gets totally messed up, that was the case in 2015. So 2016 rolls around. And a lot happens in 2016 from people making up stories about who are now very close friends of mine, by the way. We actually became friends out of these stories that were made. We crossed paths in a very unusual way. For the stories they came up with, they took my mom and they made my mom look kind of, well, what they did was they said, well, he's this and this. And so my mom, being the protective person, reached out and says, listen, you don't know my son. I'm the one who birthed him. So if you have questions about him, come to me. She was very protective because, remember, I was still struggling with defending myself. I could do a lot, but defending myself wasn't exactly the easiest road that I had over these years. So 2016 tells itself. I had good, bad, ugly. When it came to getting out in the community, really the only thing that I had, and it wasn't even bad, was just people wanting to learn, wanting to be educated. Wait, you're blind and you can do this? How? And it wasn't out of ignorance. A lot of it was just out of sheer morbid curiosity. And they wanted to know what it's like. And personally, I was embraced by that. Now, I must point out that during this time, I'm still fighting for services through the Department for the Blind, which I still to this day am, by the way, even in 2025. But what I did was I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel uncomfortable with them asking that question because I felt like if they're going to learn, instead of me being arrogant and basically saying, well, you should have known, I felt, well, what if that's not their fault? And maybe it's not their fault that they didn't know. Maybe the reason they didn't know was because nobody told them. So I'm going to do it. And I spent time educating them. Now, there was one exception to this rule. And we went to a BK to celebrate my nephew's birthday, one of my nephew's birthdays one year. And I'll never forget this, 2017. And 2017 takes on a life of its own because of some family issues plus online bullying. But we'll get to that after I tell you the BK story. Now, my nieces and nephews always loved to play in the ball pit at this particular BK. So they had fun. Now, there was a big no-no at this restaurant. What was the no-no, you ask? Well, when you tell me that your bathrooms are brailled, I expect that I'm seeing Braille on the signage. Braille, we all know what Braille is if we're blind or visually impaired, but to the sighted listening to Aaron's opinion, let me educate that Braille is a form of dots that are lined up on a, there are 6 dots in a Braille cell, and each formation of dots, like dots 1, 2, and 4, might make the letter F, or dots 1 and 3 for the letter K, so that whatever dot numbers are applied determine the letter written, or in certain cases, the number written, because of what is called Nemeth code, or for some who don't understand the origin of Nemeth code, I use the numeric code terminology, which is the lower version of those dots, 2, 3, 5, and 6, in different formations equal to various numbers. I'll give you an example. Dots 2, 5, and 6 is the number 4, but in writing, in sentences, is a Braille period. So those are important because when you understand, if you're a business owner, you'll understand why I said this is important when writing details on the bathrooms. Men's bathrooms and women's bathrooms in most places are brailled with the letter M and a W, or men and or women, depending upon how large the signboard is. And often they take laminated Braille paper and they'll take a Dymo tape labeler, or they'll braille it on the actual piece. And the Dymo tape labelers, they would put the Braille labels across, and it's backing tape. So on the very back, it's very sturdy, very hard tape. I'm not sure. Maybe my explanation probably might not be as much justice as Aaron's later if he wants to chime in on that. But it's a very, very firm label that it would be very hard to take off unless you have nails so sharp that they could pretty much remove anything, including pieces of wood off of wall paneling. But the on the doors, on the signboards, instead of a men's and women's bathroom, I saw a design that was like a key. So when you put your hand up on it, there's a rounded kind of design at the top, and then it goes down and it's like a hook at the bottom for the men's bathroom, and then for the women's bathroom was a straight, or for the women's bathroom, and the men's bathroom was a straight line going down with about a 45-degree angle to the right. And they said it was a Braille sign. Well, I objected, because to me that's not a sign at all. That's a or at least that's not a good way to know. It's a tactical symbol, yes. It's a tactile symbol, yes. But for a person who may not understand what that tactile symbol is, that still leaves them having to ask what it is, right? So I went to the front desk and I said, hey, I would like to notify you that your sign does not have Braille lettering on it like you thought. I told the manager, I said, hey, thank you. I told the manager, I said, your sign has two different symbols, and I explained, as I explained to you that are the listeners, exactly what the sign was. He says, well, I could pay you $25 to label it. I said, you could, but that's not the point, and I would do it too. But here's the problem. It isn't my job to do your work. If you are making reasonable accommodations, it is very important, and I said this is a future lesson if I may. And he took it, I will say, with no anger at all. I said, I would appreciate if you consider that in order for a business to be ADA compliant, reasonable accommodations under any circumstances must be met, whether if you have stairs, that includes a wheelchair ramp, if you have signs for rooms, having Braille on them, or if you can't for some reason, show them what the designs are when they first walk in. If they're asking you, hey, where are the restrooms? Show them, okay, so this right here means men's, this right here means women's. Because some people may not ask right away. They may just want to get to the restroom, go in and get out. So you want to be as careful as you can to accommodate. He apologized for the lack of accommodation, which I thought was very noble. Now, there was one catch here. He did not pay money, and I was unable to make the labels because he didn't pay, and I don't make labels if somebody doesn't. If you're giving me what you're willing to do, for one, don't tell me you're willing to do it and then not do it, because I cannot follow through on my end of the word if you don't follow on yours, especially in that case. Now, I did, however, go ahead and make a men's and women's label just so I could show a family member of mine how that would look. And what I did, as a bit of a joke, because my brother did not believe that I could do it, was stuck men's and then women's on the door. My mom's bedroom door had the women's Braille label on it, and my bedroom had the men's label on it. So that was a little bit of a and it's funny because it was mom's room, so it was only appropriate, right? Women's room. It was my mom's room, and my mom, and then was the only occupant of that room, and the other room. Okay. It was funny because my mom actually saw the label. I left it there for about a week. My mom saw the label, and she looks at me, and pardon the expression, but she goes, "What the hell is this on my door? What have you put on my door? What are you trying to do here? You're decorating my door." And I told her the point behind it, and when I tell you, she laughed. Now understand, my mom was very ill, so laughing too hard was kind of a bad thing, because when you have COPD and you cough as hard as she did afterwards, I promise you I felt very horrible. And my mom kept telling me, "Don't feel bad. Look, that was the funniest thing you've ever done." And I, to this day, I still consider it a slightly minor payback, considering my brother thought it was okay to put a bowl of pudding in front of my bed bowl one year. And quite frankly, it was it was everything I could do not to figure out how to get it back then. That was clear back in '02 when he did that. So, hey, 2017, yeah, it's an odd number, but an odd prank, too. And an odd gesture. Because I stuck another men's label on his door, too. Go figure. But, hey, it was fun. At the time, however, the thing that was not fun is him and his then-girlfriend became very argumentative with each other. So while the online bullying was still happening, and I was getting threats from a person in Arizona who was fully sighted, threatening my entire family because I broke up with a girl who was actually unfaithful. I didn't exactly approve of hearing the guy get on and say, by the way, I'm her boyfriend, and me saying, oh, I thought I was, or vice versa. And not knowing that I was basically in a triangle and had no clue I was in a triangle. Pythagoras' theorem not included, by the way. Now somebody's looking at me funny, promise you. I then proceed, as much as possible, to kind of look at a different direction in life after that. But my brother and his now ex were fighting so much that I had serious health complications from all the drama, the stress in the household, and I've already got hypertension, mind you. So I get high blood pressure. But to have a blood pressure spike so high that the tinnitus is so horrible in my ear that my blood pressure hits 229/81 and lands me in the hospital, that's not a good sign. Especially if you become nonverbal for a period during that time. Thank you to my mom for detailing every event long afterwards so that I would be able to relay it. Because honestly, there's things about that night that I don't remember. However, in that same span of time, I proceed to, have somebody come visit from the state of Michigan, and it was a short-lived visit, but it was a good one. We listened to Gabriel Iglesias together, and if anybody knows who Gabriel Iglesias is, they call him Fluffy. There's a story behind that. A lot of people like Gabriel Iglesias or Jeff Dunham. So that was 2017, including a fishing trip, which I, by the way, have an audio archive. It was very beautiful when the family went on a Father's Day fishing trip. And but nobody caught any fish, which, by the way, is my luck. Every time I go fishing, I never catch one. Yet, it's funny because my older brother, he can always catch them. He's like, oh, yeah, I reeled in this stick, or this fish. And I said, what? You reeled in a fish, and here I am sitting here with nothing but snags, tree branches, sticks. So I guess I've kind of developed the adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but fish never seem to bite on the pole. And that was sort of the adage, and that kind of was an inside joke in between me and my family now. That never goes away, and they never let me live it down. 2018 rolls around, and oh boy, 2018. My mom's health starts to go down the drain. Online, we're still dealing with bullying. I might want to point out, when you hear me say, you're going to keep hearing that, and that's an ongoing pattern here. 2018, bullying online continues. But the biggest hit in the family happens when my mom's health starts to go downhill, and fighting within the family becomes an absolute disaster. And it becomes a disaster because while my mom's down and in and out of the hospital, my brother, who was no longer living here, continues to start fights with his ex, who was, because my nieces and nephew on my younger brother's children were living here. And by the way, he would come over, and instead of them all having a happy-go-lucky time in co-parenting, it became a war of wills every day. You did this! You lied to me about this! Blah, blah, blah. And I kept hearing it. My mom tried to get me to, let them handle their business, which was great until it wasn't. Till finally I snapped. Anybody knows me knows I try to keep it cool. I said, listen, I have nieces and nephews that are hearing you. I'm hearing you. And I don't want to hear you. Not if you're going to fight. I want to hear, this is not healthy for me, emotionally or otherwise. And my mom also agreed. She said, you know what? I can't get mad at you for saying that, because that is about as elegantly put and as and as respectfully put as you could possibly put it. While that was going online, let's fast forward the clock. Let's go to 2019. And 2019 kind of has a bad twist to it. Computer equipment I had failed. Remember 2015 I said don't trust a person that is going to turn their back on you? Well, the same does so, blaming other parties as being responsible. Now, I might point out that's sort of a thing that, I get it. You could say, well, that's minor. Well, it's not minor when you get bullied by other people because of it. And they say, oh, well, we didn't have anything to do with it. But the answer is actually the writing's on the wall when they say, he came to me and told me what you did. End quote. By the way, while that was going on, locally within the household, we had more problems. My brother had moved back in and out. He was in and out. And had taken up a drinking habit that was pretty significant. Now, mind you, he was already drinking a lot, but the drinking habit got much worse. So alcoholism becomes a problem, and we're fighting with that. Fighting with his constant outbursts. And at this point, I had met a girl who was fully sighted. We were trying to date. Now, I will say there were a lot of highlights, including one night at 5 o'clock in the morning. I could not sleep. I was very much down on myself after all the things that were happening locally. Her and I are on a call on Skype. And we made up this comedy skit about an automated lady that, for some reason, is just on your phone, no matter every time you pick it up.
Hello, you have reached the automated lady. I will not get off your phone.
And you're freaking out by this point, and the automated lady is suddenly, you're even calling emergency services, but she picks up another number and says,
You dialed 9112. You perpet.
Insert any expletive you wish. That's why I beeped it out, because, frankly, you could insert any expletive there. Perpry was sort of a variant of another word I made up called perper. Just like there are other silly words I make up. Blame the autism spectrum and, neurological processing and things and stuff, and, you get that. 2019. A year that, like no other, saw lots of trials, tribulations, laughter, and sadness. The bullying continued, however, that year, and that was an issue. 2019 also became the year that I found out that the same girlfriend that I had put trust in, oh, this sounds familiar, cheated on me with, some guy I didn't even know about. And I only learned through hearing her mother say, are you on with your boyfriend? Insert his name here. It wasn't Brandon. Just so you know. That's how I knew. When I confronted it, oh, I have to go. I'll let you go. I'll have to talk here in a little bit. Uh-oh. I don't know about that. I think at this point I'm kind of done and I'm kind of tired of it. And, cheating is never good. Remember Jessica that I met? We talk about that in the last segment. Please see segment 1 if you are listening deep into this and maybe you kind of fast forward it a little bit. Well, I met her on Yahoo Messenger in 2004. Well, Jessica has just gotten out of a bad relationship. This is 2020. Now we're fast forwarding into the COVID era. As COVID began to become rampant and things started to shut down, she made it here to the airport on February 21st, 2020. Here's a little ironic part about that. That's also my brother's birthday. All right? That's the fun part, right? His birthday falls on the exact day we get together. That's how you celebrate a birthday, by being happy and watching your brother not only say congratulations while saying thanks for a happy birthday, but me paying him back for a birthday trick he pulled on me the year before. Let me go back to that for a second, now that I brought that up, because if you guys like pranks, you'll appreciate him and me both. Him, because he pulled the prank, and me, because I couldn't help but laugh about it, because, quite frankly, for some stupid reason, I fell for it. Without knowing I fell for it. All right, here's how that went. We're sitting down eating the birthday cake. My brother, there's a candle right near me. Blow out the candle, Brandon. Okay. Ah! You know what the snap was and the ah after that? It was what's called a trick candle. Now what a trick candle does is as you blow right into it, it comes back and it kind of beams you just slightly. Doesn't hurt you. It just kind of like goes, hello, I'm here too. We've got the candle blown out, mind you. But it was kind of funny because I'm like, well, catch a falling candle, don't touch it in the pocket, just let it blow away. Anyway, so 2020 when Jess gets here, what a day. What a day. We start our own silly traditions, our own silly phrases. I actually have a song in AI literally called If I Could Live in a Chin that's resulted in that. And the first line is something along the lines of, it all started in the backseat of my mom's old Chevy car. I gave her a gentle vev-vev. It was the vev that started it all. There's a story behind that. So if you guys ever want, I will, as I start to publish my music, a lot of it is actually unpublished. And I mean by that, I've made these tracks, but I haven't really shared them everywhere yet. But I will begin to share those as time goes. There is, however, a YouTube video on my YouTube channel. Look for Webbo Webbo, roll at gmail.com, and you'll start to see these. So 2020 and 2021 came to be. 21 came to be, but with a bit of tragedy. Unfortunately, while the bullying continued, that is minus 5 months, because I took a 5 months hiatus off of the internet entirely. 5 months. Sorry, bye-bye, people. You only knew me for a while, but I disappeared. For 5 months to avoid any more bullying, till I came back online, apparently, and realized I had still been getting bullied. But there's one piece of sad news. You'll remember I mentioned Sean last year, or 2021. Last segment I mentioned that he had passed away from cancer. Well, we learned of his cancer diagnosis in the end of 2019, because he hadn't quite come out public with it quite yet. But when he did, all of us were heartbroken. Now, 21, we lose him. And this also started a very, very, very horrendous and hellacious journey with my mom's health, where it started to go downhill. She was in and out of the hospital. And that was a segue to 2022. By the way, the bullying continued a lot in 21, but again, perseverance and having a girlfriend who's stuck by your side at this point for more than a year really made a difference. We came up with our own traditions. She actually talked me into getting TikTok, which I was refusing to get, but she somehow managed to talk me into getting it, I guess because she figured, hey, you got to at least try something once. You want to get yourself out there? Here, try this. This is where everybody seems to be posting anymore, so let's give it a go. She was very, and has been, always very encouraging. That's just Jessica for you. Maybe one day you'll hear her voice. I hope and pray. Because she has a journey of her own. And let me tell you, her story is definitely full of highs, lows, mids, treble, bass, tweeters, subwoofers, speakers. You get the drift. 2022. And this tragic train wreck turns very, very tragic. Now, we move somebody into our home that is wanting to learn independent living skills. Yes, that's amazing, right? Because I, along with my mom and Jess, are willing to teach this individual not only about living skills as it relates to how to do things, but it helps have good social skills as well in public when you're dealing with certain things. Now, it doesn't mean that you should hide your personality. By the way, let me underscore Do not hide your personality. Do not hide your personality, because, and I want you to listen to this very, very carefully, people need to be able to accept you as you. If you go in there acting like somebody you aren't, people are less likely to register that you're you when they see who you are when they meet you in person and hang out with you, I don't know, at your home. So be yourself. Just make sure you're appropriate in the process. That's something we worked on, about what to do both in public and not. And some things got tense, I'll be honest. Stubbornness became a thing. Moreover, after the passing of my mom. But we need to gloss over that, because while the bullying continued, the worst thing that happened in 22 happened on April 22nd. By the way, this is, if I look at my calendar on my computer that's next to me here, I believe today, our date is what, the 11th of April at the time of this recording, all right? So we are exactly 11 days short of the day my mom passed 3 years ago. That gives you an idea of, at the time of this is actually a very difficult subject, but because I am more ready, willing, and able, it doesn't matter the difficulty. I'm still going to share it anyway. When I was on a phone call, well, first of all, let's start with April 22nd, because we had no idea, I had no idea my mom passed. Now, Jess had gotten an inkling something wasn't right, but we also knew my mom's rule: if I'm in bed asleep, do not enter that room without any, for any reason, lest it be an emergency, which was absolutely understandable, because when somebody wants to sleep, they don't want to just be woke up for no reason at all. Particularly if that means, if you're not, last thing you want to do is get woke up to, for example, drama, which my younger brother was known for waking us all up for crazy stuff. At this point, my mom, Jess had heard an eerie feeling in the house, and she had an eerie feeling in general. My head had pressure that night, and I didn't dawn on me to think about there may have been something going on that I didn't know. Now I want you to put that together. It feels eerie to her. I have pressure in the head, but neither of us, we didn't want to pop a door open and get the scare of our life to find Mom going, "What are you doing in the room here? I'm trying to go to sleep." Well, we went ahead and went to bed, both of us, though we both felt uneasy. The next morning, I thought I heard Mom get up, and I record a NASCAR race that day. In fact, 2 races. The Arca Menard Series had run the General Tire 200 at Talladega Super Speedway, and then the Advocare 300 race that followed that race at Talladega for the Xfinity Series, for those who didn't realize that I'm a big NASCAR fan. And I was kind of fascinated by the fact that for some odd reason they had 3 different straightaway cameras literally not even in sync with each other, so one car sounded like 3 passing by the straightaway. Literally. Like that. So anyway, I'm recording that, the NASCAR race. My brother has just come home from Omaha, Nebraska, adjacent to us, about 30 miles to the south and a little ways west. I say about 30 miles. I'm including the heart of downtown, not just getting to Omaha. If you want to go to the entrance, that's probably 20-some miles, but Omaha's pretty good size. So he comes back, realized he hadn't heard from Mom, and didn't dawn on me that I hadn't heard from Mom either all day, so what's up? This is April 23rd, all right? My brother walks into Mom's room. Now, I'm on a phone call with a friend of mine from Massachusetts who's telling me about a problem she's had with somebody that has been giving her trouble for a while. When I hear out of the back of the house, "Somebody, Brandon, call 911 now, something's wrong with Mom." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "I don't think she's alive." And he was very panicked, naturally. And so was I. So I called 911. I relayed the information. After I called 911 and talked to dispatch, I handed my brother the phone, let him talk to dispatch while I made calls on Facebook to my other family members. I, within about a half hour, had my older brother, my grandmother, and my grandfather, my uncle, all here within about a half hour, while the paramedics are already back there tending to Mom. Then the announcement came. I'm sitting here, and pardon me, folks, I get this. Brandon, I hate to inform you, but she's gone. Immediately, I took to Facebook and let people know. The amount of support that was lacking was horrendous. I didn't get a whole lot of people reaching out for a while. The ones that did, however, I will forever be grateful to all of you for that. However, let's fast forward 3 days. When a near kitchen fire erupts, Jess is teaching the individual that's staying with us how to cook, and well, the rule about check around, feel around, check around, make sure there's nothing in front of the stove, near the stove, around the burners, close to the burners, or anything like that, because we have a gas range. I'm not exactly a fan of gas range stoves, by the way, for your information. So she says, check around. He goes, okay, cool, it's all clear. Well, if the recipe that you are making calls for a half a cup of cooking oil, and you put that in there, and it hits a rag that you didn't know was there, and you smell smoke, see, and I said, wait, I'm smelling smoke here. He goes, oh, no, nothing's wrong. It's probably just the pan of the food. Well, the food hadn't been put in the pan yet. Well, Jess did the blowback test. The blowback test, if you're curious, is when you blow, does the flame pop up, and does it continue to ignite, or does it extinguish? Nope. It blew back and started rising. She's rushing everybody out, only I'm the one running out of the house. That is to say, except for her, who was actually, very daring, took a whole cup of water and just right on top of the flame. And with oil fires like that, you're not really supposed to hit those with water. From what I'm told, you're supposed to smother the flame with usually something that is not flammable, that can withstand the amount of heat and pressure coming from the flame that's being invoked. However, all it took was a little bit of water, and it blew, pull it out, because it wasn't that severe. It was just a tiny little, mini fire that literally scorched only a section of countertop. But it was big enough for me to feel a little bit traumatized by it, because, quite frankly, if you want me to be honest with you, I had just inherited this home from my mom. 3 days later, after her passing, we suddenly almost go up in smoke. And I say we because, but remember, gas stove, if that flame had moved anywhere close to the gas burner, boom! And I don't think any of us want to think about that. So that's 2022. Some things were rocky toward the end of that year. Now, there were some good moments. I will say one of my favorite memories, though, the guy, the fellow staying with us, had a very unique way of cutting up the burritos, the long burritos, and every cut was a design. Every cut was a very, very elegantly designed. Like, it wasn't even... And this was like... We're trying to cut it in quarters, but what he did was he made almost little designs out of it. And I thought, you know what? Hey, now that he's doing this, instead of force, I'm just going to have him make little designs out of this. I like this, because I cannot cut because of horrible dexterity. So I have to have assistance no matter what. So he gave it a go. And let's see, there were he actually managed to make one look almost like an egg whisk, which that was kind of cool. Or like the little things on the mixer, the little things that flap around on the mixer, that little metal piece, and then you got the plastic parts inside that when you turn around and you're mixing by hand. And then he made one look like a bacon strip. It literally was thin enough to be a bacon strip, but except all the stuff was in it. So as far as thickness, it had the thickness of the burrito, but it had the width and even the length of the bacon strip. I mean, it was just, you can't ask for anything more comical and more funny than that. Okay, so that was fun. Yes, the online bullying, however, continued. And then we go to 23. The people living with me now, a possibly soon return guest of this podcast, actually, who I'm going to give a shout to because why not? She's awesome. Nesma, who came to move with us in February of 23, along with friends of hers and mine. Well, at least we thought they were friends. And that went south. Accusations started up all over the fact of me not wanting to bend on something I didn't feel safe doing. When I was at a doctor's appointment with Nesma, I called to check on the house and heard, "Can you walk me out? Can you come outside with us today? Because we're going to be outside and basically what have you." In the grand scheme of things, and I didn't feel comfortable being outdoors in that type of UV radiation. The UV index that day was 9, which, in case anybody hasn't really known, the only bad thing about 2020 for me and Jess simultaneously together physically that I can tell you was annoying was it's one thing to get sunburned, it's another to get sun poisoned. And that happened because we were outside in a swimming pool, and quite frankly, the temperatures were beautiful. They were gorgeous that day. The problem was the sun was out so bright, and we didn't think to have any of the P51 sunscreen that we normally use, PF51 sunscreen. We, I guess, weren't planning on that much sun. Well, we learned how much sun we were exposed to months later. Let me tell you something. I don't ever want to do that again. I mean, I'll go outside and enjoy the sun, but whew, not like that. So 2023 ends with a bang, or goes with a bang, because quite frankly, while that's happening, we had them, the gal was, we found out, lying about, she'd say, "Oh, I'm on the phone with my psychiatrist or my psychologist. They want you to know this, they want you to know that." Now, we wouldn't hear voices, but we'd hear music over the headset. Not talking, right? Passing, because I've got very strong ears. And I could hear, which is what you normally hear somebody's playing something on a headset music-wise. Just the sound of the crash cymbals or lyrics. If anybody's ever walked by somebody with a pair of earbuds, you know what I'm talking about. If you listen very carefully, if you can't hear that, I'll give you one way you can. Use a digital recorder, put it in pause mode so that you can hear the sound to that microphone. Aim the recorder right at the earbud next to the person who's wearing it. And trust me, you will hear. You may not hear what they're playing, but you'll be able to hear the sub-harmonics, the sub-hisses. But anyway, she was dishonest, this gal was, about a lot of things, saying she had a background in counseling she did not have, and a lot of things. We learned a lot of talking about I'm abused by my family, and we later learned she was not. Matter of fact, they showed up unannounced, and she seemed to be very happy about it, and hugged them. Now listen, I went through abuse at the hands of my dad. I could not picture myself hugging my father. I'm not a violent person, and I listen, I would call the cops before I would do this, but I'll just tell you this. If I was any other individual, if my dad showed up, I would have, if I were a violent man, I would have shoved him straight out that door. I would have given him a catapult he would never forget. My porch, the newly designed porch, it would have looked more like a diving board by the time I was done. But no, I have more discretion on that, even with my worst enemies. Show up at my door, I'm likely just going to call the cops and have them trespass you. Because, frankly, I have no time to fight something that I can't change. Right? If I don't want to deal with you, I'm just not going to. Well, she chose to, and, well, turns out she admitted that she'd lied about the abuse. Why she did this, I have no clue, and I never will, and it's not my place to know, because my job is to worry about my life. So that was that part of 2023, and that started a 6-month isolation period, and you're going to ask why, and I'm going to answer that very quickly. Because while Nesma and I were gone, when I said I didn't feel comfortable, the word no about me being outdoors, and see, she wanted us to walk her all the time. But I knew she was capable of getting around by herself, and I even explained as such when I got home. I said, listen, part of why I said no about this is I cannot walk you everywhere. I know you can get around, but you got to learn to try. You can't just rely on me to constantly transport you places. You know, number one, my back may be getting stronger, but it ain't that strong. I have full-blown scoliosis. All right, you gotta have to kind of learn to walk. And Nesma didn't make any bones about reminding me that, yes, she could actually get around pretty good. You know, she had balance issues, yes. Not Nesma, I'm talking about the other gal. She had balance issues, but it wasn't as bad as what we were told. You know, and this is why, and Nesma has been very, very much an advocate for me and for Jess, advocated for us a lot, even through her personal struggles. I could not tell you how thankful I am to her. And I don't think words can express it. Now let's move on past April, because I said a 6-month isolation period, but that did not include the fact that there was some exceptions. We did do some special things together. 2023, July. Now July 2023, you see, it's kind of fun to go to a speedway and watch an IndyCar race and realize you're going to see Carrie Underwood in concert, and you're also going to get to watch Kenny Chesney in concert while watching 2 car races together. And 3 of us went. Me, Jess, and Nesma, because that's who was living in the house at the time. And, oh, by the way, should I point out, you ever want to have an adventure? Try finding out how you're going to get back home when there's no lift there. Now, some of the people at the speedway were not exactly the most accommodating about it. They were just like, well, you should have figured that out before you got here. Well, okay, maybe. Except maybe not. Because there's things you can't find out till you actually get there sometimes. And in my case, I didn't realize you could actually put in addresses into Lyft, even if you're not there, to see whether or not rides will show up. But I don't want to book a ride, have them show up, and us not be there. I mean, that's kind of dumb. I mean, hey, gives the driver a chance to get some mileage, but I don't want to do that. That's not even how you're supposed to do it. All right, so what happens at the end of the Speedway? Because we were able to get a lift to Speedway because we left from Omaha, from the old Chicago, and went down to Newton to Iowa Speedway. Well, getting back, the trusty sheriff of that city, of that fine, very fine city, stayed with us and allowed us to get assistance. Actually called some friends of his who were going to drive us to Perkins in Des Moines. We were going to get a lift from Perkins and go to home through the lift, which meant we would have probably paid another $200 some odd, but hey, who cares, right? It's Iowa Speedway. We're doing a special outing for us, $400 worth of fun that we cannot replace. And trust me, it was one of the best days I've ever had, because it was for the first time I got to do something big, like go to something I enjoyed. And let me tell you something, I relished it big time. Big time. But that's not all. An unexpected turn happened. We're in the car of that couple, and right before we get to Perkins, I hear this exchange between husband and wife. Wife, hey, how would you like to take a road trip? Husband, where to? Wife, I think we're going to go ahead and take them the rest of the way home. Husband, I think I'm down with that. Wife, only thing, can you please buy us a snack while you're at Perkins? Sure, but what do we owe you for the trip? And I got the most unexpected answer. Just the dessert. I am okay with that. So we got to Perkins, ordered their desserts, and ordered our meals. We ate dinner, because we were going to eat at Perkins anyway. That was our plan to start with, once we realized that we didn't have a lift to from Newton. If they could just get us to Perkins, that's all we needed. But no, this couple wasn't satisfied with that. We're going to take you the rest of the way home. And so we got home without trouble. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. By the way, I have recordings of that. So if anybody wants to hear what it sounded like to have 28 Indy cars flying past you at over 180 miles an hour, I might have some audio I could share for that. That was fun. Now, we're going to go ahead and fast forward. I feel so bad. You know, Aaron usually, when I've listened to some of these podcasts, I usually hear a lot of, sometimes you got to ask a lot of questions, but I think he knows. I come in here prepared, almost like a talk show host. I feel like I'm on a talk show, like I'm running a talk show right now. Like I'm the host in the host chair right now, and I'm telling you the story, and here he is. He's listening like the producer in the back seat. It's fun, but at the same time, I feel bad for the guy. Aaron, you can chime in anytime. Don't hesitate to interrupt if you have questions, please. Don't feel abated here. In July, the end of July, August, one of our dearest friends moves in with us, and I mean to tell you, if Alexi were still alive today, I'd probably have her on a second microphone shouting at you guys, because Alexi was another one of our biggest advocates. You see, here's the cool part about Alexi. She picked up on our sense of humor, but she always came up with surprises for all of us, and it never failed. One night we were all going to go cook dinner, and then I hear this: "No, you guys sit down. I've got it." Oh, I've got it, all right. Turned into a taco bowl that we'll never forget. We call it Alexi's Taco Bowl. See, it was your regular taco salad, with all the ingredients that's usually on a taco salad, but with a twist. Instead of any type of corn chip shell, you put whatever chips you wanted, your flavor of chips. Each person's bowl had their own flavor of chips in it. And for what purpose, you ask? That way, you could taste it the way you wanted to taste it. So I went the route of sour cream and onion ruffles. Or sour cream and cheddar ruffles. I'm like, hey, this is kind of an interesting mixture. Let's see what this does. By the way, it's quite fun during this time. And herein lie the fun part. You wouldn't believe it if you tried, but it was one of many fun stories with her, including walks to the mailbox. She would not go without offering, hey, does any one of you want to come with me to the mailbox so we can go check, and back, so we can just go on a little family walk. She was all about those walks. You know I'm all about that walk. Anyway, all right, I'm done. Anyway, so that was that. Until her breathing started to become a problem when we realized that there was an issue. See, now, she had we learned, had pulmonary embolisms, and the doctor put her on a blood thinner. Now, if you're on a blood thinner for a pulmonary embolism, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be taken off that blood thinner unless your doctor's an idiot, which her doctor was. He decided that she didn't need to be on it because, quote, the blood was no longer coagulating enough to the point where it needed to be used. Well, big mistake, because off the blood thinner she went into trouble she ended up in. I'll never forget this. We're at September 8th at this point of 23 as we continue our journey through the life of Brandon Hennis. Brought to you, of course, by the Aaron's Opinion podcast. Now, let's skip forward to that day, because this is very tragic. Now, I might add, while the bullying online continued to a degree, it was slightly, shall I say, overshadowed in such a way that it couldn't be thought of because, well, you just can't do that when Alexi's around, because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be online much. Why? Alexi wanted us and us together as much as possible. It didn't matter what we were doing. Come on, guys, let's spend some time. Even though some of the music she listened to was very dark due to a lot of depression, she felt the best she had ever felt being here, according to her words. Now, these are her words, not mine, hers. And I said, listen, I'm nothing special. I'm just me. By the way, big mistake. If I ever hear the words "don't ever say that again" in the tone used when I said it again, I'm covering my ears and I'm zipping my mouth and I'm not opening it for the next week. Because what I hear out of her mouth is, don't you ever let me catch you say you're not special. Ever again. Not in my presence, you won't do that. Alrighty then. Thank you for letting me know this. At any point, I said, listen, I appreciate you. But remember, I'm only humble because I am me, and you are you. We're all special in our own way. I'm just not so special that I must be above or below anything. I'm just me. And she goes, I'll take that. As long as you don't down yourself. But September 8th, she started feeling really rough, breathing heavily every time she'd walk. Now, the day before, she actually passed out in the first bedroom and managed to crash her hand into a window so hard it actually shattered the interior window. We had to cover it with a storm window because she had fainted. And I asked her, do you need to go to the hospital? And she said, no, I don't think I need to go. It's just, I'm not feeling right. I just need to sit down. Okay. I always listen to the person. If you say, no, I'm going to respect you. You know your body better than me. The following day, she's still having the same problem. I said, do you need to go in? I said, Lex, do you need to go in? She goes, no, I just need to sit down. I just need to breathe. I need to sit down and relax. She said, can you get my CPAP for me? I said, yeah. Right when I'm dragging out the CPAP, she has to make a restroom run. And unfortunately, then we hear blood coming up and she starts hyperventilating, which that's when we knew trouble started. When the next thing I hear is I can't breathe, and I'm right there dialing 911. I set down the CPAP as fast as I could, called 911 right away. Now, right away, but they still took 20 minutes to get here. During the time I'm on the phone with the paramedics, she has stopped breathing at this point, which was only announced to me by Jess in the background. Hey, Brandon, just so you know, she stopped breathing. So I let the dispatch know that. Should have sent him here faster, right? No, it still took 20 minutes to get here. That wasn't all. She had a pulse, but the pad said CPR, CPR, CPR. But guess what wasn't administered? Somebody say it with me. Guess what wasn't administered? CPR. No, not at all. She ended up passing away on the way to the doctor's office. But she gave Jess one last look of love, and with what strength left in her arms, I got one last hug. I'll never forget it. Gentle, loving hug. Almost as if to say thank you for being in my life. Now, it should be noted I knew her in person from before this, but when Lexi passed, we were all devastated. Every one of us were. We were not on Team Talk at the time. We didn't care to be on any internet programs much during this time when we were taking care of Lexi. There was no need to be. We were happy in our element. We talked to people as we could, but most of our time we spent together. That's 2023 in a nutshell for you, till the end of November. And we had a couple move in, but in staggered succession. The girl telling me her mom's having problems with her, that she's having problems with her mom. Their relationship is becoming very strained, according to her, to the point where it's abusive. Now, I might want to point out that through all this time, I don't get out and travel much due to the fact of, not really having a lot of resources here. This is a small town we live in, so we really have limited transportation here. So getting out is not always an option. And if you go out using your insurance ride, you only get 100 miles, and, oh, by the way, you can only have one person ride with you. So you cannot do family outings easily. And if there's not a lot of trusted people, well, guess what? You probably won't be dealing with them anytime soon. Well, anyway, so I offered my doors to her. She was made aware of my conditions. She was made aware of everybody else's situations as well, and understood there were ground rules and boundaries, which was fine. The guy quit his job and ended up the day afterwards at my house. All right? So this is 2023. We're still in about November here, okay? So this is November, December. And my birthday was okay. It wasn't the best birthday I've ever had, but I guess I could say one positive out of it is I started a collection of mine that I had been wanting to start for many, many years, and that dream was finally achieved. Thank you very much. Again, Nesma, thank you. Teddy Ruxpin's galore. Because for those who don't know, Teddy Ruxpin was a talking bear from the 1980s. They're a company called Worlds of Wonder. And so I started a collection of those with associated cassette tapes, and there were different makes of the unit. They were the exact same appearance, but there were differences in the motors and how the mouths moved from the different years. So like they remade the model with a few modifications to each of the motor wheels and stuff like that. So I started a collection of those. And the Nattel CNCs. The farmer says CNCs. Do you hear the frog? Anyway. Yes, I do, in my voice. So, at any rate, I bought those, and that was my birthday. That was the end of 2023. Things were okay to a point. There was some stubbornness from the guy, which even the girl was like, hey, this is not, picking up after ourselves. We're supposed to be doing that. And there wasn't a whole lot of that, but there were some good meals and stuff like that. I'm not going to sit here and say everything was bad. There were a lot of high points and stuff too. Until 2024. The bullying resumes its severity online, but is followed by a massive turn of events. Now, I might preface this by saying that Christmas morning we had a very severe medical scare, that we do not know what exactly occurred, other than that the only thing that the girls remember is me waking up screaming out in my sleep, but then Jess looks and sees me standing, and I'm tilted at almost a 45-degree angle to one side. And the next thing she knows is here's Nesma saying, Brandon, you've got to breathe. So I may have went from screaming out to not breathing. I do know I collapsed from what they told me as well, right in front of the one side of the bed. I collapsed midway, and this was Christmas morning. So we don't know what actually happened, and without even really knowing what happened, it's hard to, I'll be honest, explain to a doctor, hey, here's the event. I mean, we explained to the doctor, and even she was like, well, with you having myoclonic seizures, it wouldn't surprise me if that was what happened. That was about as close to an explanation as she could explain. I'm like, oh, well, possible. But to make you feel like you have no strength when you wake up for a while. And she goes, yeah, that is concerning. So, but the blood test came back okay. I mean, let's just be honest. I looked, the blood tests were okay. There were a couple of levels off, but nothing too serious, nothing that, needed any attention. So I was like, all right, well, okay. Maybe that was just a freak incident. Well, then February rolls along, and I have a massive blood pressure spike, and I'm getting dizzy when I stand in the shower. And I thought, all right, this can't be good. We skipped past February because not much happened then. March, The only thing that happened in February, though, was a very violent incident that occurred after being over a bowl of mashed potatoes, all right? Over a bowl of mashed potatoes. I could not stand out. I haven't been able to do a lot of meal prep for the past few years because of both sustaining an injury in 23 that has not been quite assessed in full. And the doctors thought, well, he's walking fine, so we don't really need to look into it, despite the fact I really think they should have. But that's, neither here nor there. It's learned it's best not to argue with some of these doctors down here. But, hey, this podcast, well, I don't think was designed to talk about doctors and their failures to check out a leg injury, because that has nothing to do with the point of this podcast. I don't think, at least not to me anyway. I feel like at least it's insignificant to my story, other than that I was injured and had to, kind of do things differently for a while. So I couldn't do a lot with meal prep. Well, I had wanted some mashed potatoes, and as it was, I was just kind of not feeling right walking. So I stayed seated, and the girls weren't either one feeling well, so they asked him to help out. And that went south very fast. When request turns to anger, turns to bang, bang, boom, you're flying across the house trying to both protect everybody else in the house, while meanwhile subduing the guy who's so angry that he nearly violently pulls your girlfriend to the ground, almost, but you get lucky enough to kind of subdue the situation. And
Right.
I never thought in my 30, at that time 37 years, that I had the ability to move that quick throughout my house, apart from maybe track and field.
Mm-hmm.
But look, if you have to do track and field in your house, please have a starter gun, have somebody time you, and for whatever, for the love of God, please do the right thing and actually keep record. But hey, that I digress. That was February. March came to a serious head. I had a bad infection, which, look, for those who don't know, when you have a infection that is a sinus infection, I'm going to give you the name of a condition. You'll probably be going, what is this? And I'll describe it. Subacute pansinusitis. Subacute pansinusitis. What that is instead of it just being an acute sinus infection, it's subacute, which means that it's been there for a while, but it also is pansinusitis, which means it affects multiple sinus cavities at the same time. So while one cavity is, instead of the normal sinusitis where one cavity gets affected, infected that is, you're going to have multiple cavities infected, and simultaneously it is bad. Well, it even went as far as to affect my eating. The doctors described it as a food pop. Now, I'll explain this. I had just tried a piece of chicken, and it got stuck in my throat. Well, what they saw was that leftover piece of chicken not moving. Why? It hit a swollen spot, and so the doctor felt that may have been, that's why he thought it looked like, at first he thought maybe, he says it looks like a tonsil stone, but because you don't have your adenoids, I should point out as a kid I had my adenoids removed, tonsils as well, tonsillectomy and adenoidectomy as a kid. And so that obviously means that it ain't a tonsil stone. Clearly it got to be something else, and it was food that was left over, and the infection was just pretty much riding it out. And it took me a long time to get past that. They had me on one antibiotic that didn't work, and meanwhile, I've had at this point a second trip to the hospital by March 17th for atrial tachycardia that was trailed by sinus arrhythmia that had already been diagnosed on March 11th. So 17th, I'm in the hospital for this, and come to find out that the antibiotic that I was taking was also contributing to other problems, so we ended up not taking it. They switched me to a different antibiotic, which did wonders, but the doctor on March 11th had prescribed me a medication that had a variant of Adderall in it called clonidine, and clonidine and me, well, had a very bad relationship. I don't think that I would ever want to wake up in the morning with shallow breathing ever again. And the fact that the effects were long-lasting from taking it multiple days, again, sorry, but not sorry, I don't ever want to do that again.
Sure.
So it's now been listed on my allergy list. Now, that's March. In a short nutshell, here's the problem. They plotted and interfered between me and my girlfriend, so I actually lost my girlfriend for a month from this, all during this time. And a lot of bad things happened from that point forward. Well, I was here by myself for the entire end of March all the way to April the 28th. And how I got lucky to get around those tornadoes being in a house by myself, I have no clue. Because, listen, I'm not afraid of thunderstorms, but I am afraid of tornadoes.
Sure.
So, give me a good clap of thunder any day, and I'll embrace it. But if that thing has a vortex on it, get it out of here.
So, right.
Go ahead, Aaron. Down to Aaron in turn 2.
So can you hear me well, by the way?
No, but I hear you well. Very loud and clear.
Oh, I am loud and clear, right? That's what you're saying, right? Oh, okay.
There's a running joke, so everybody in my house will say, hey, is the light on? No, but the light's on.
So, I will say, if you could please actually mute your microphone for just a second.
Yeah, let me do that here. Well, in my case, since this thing does not like to mute, I'll reach for my mixer and go like that.
Right. So I can tell. That's fine. So what I can tell you is over this hour and a half, we've learned a tremendous amount about your entertaining life. And off air, I can certainly tell you a little bit more about some things that I've heard around the community. I appreciate that you kept the names of the people private. I will also tell you that I know who they are. And I will also tell you that they used to be on Aaron's Opinion. And after having some personal conversations with someone who I'm not going to mention on air, but I will say it is someone who is a huge fan of Aaron's Opinion, those particular people who separated your whole family, those particular people are no longer, they are no longer part of this podcast after I learned what I learned. I will say that I have heard all these fascinating tales before from talking to this other particular person. And you know what I'll say is, you know, the most interesting thing with all of your challenges as we walk to the end of part 2, because you have so much beautiful wisdom to share with so many of us here at Aaron's Opinion. What I will say is
Indeed.
that what really stands out to me is how gracefully you're willing to just internalize all this nonsense and make sense of nonsense. That's really something that really stands out to me.
And if I may, the reason is because I feel like this. In life, there are challenges, and in life, there's difficulties. But the rule about it is if I was to stay quiet about it,
right,
all I would do is bottle it up. And I realize that the bottling it up isn't allowing anybody else to get to know me. All it does is makes me basically too introverted to understand myself. And I feel like the more I talk about it, perhaps the less it'll be on my shoulder, and also the more I talk about it, the more people get to know who I am for who I really am. Maybe then the moniker of "Watch out for Brandon" will eventually return to the normalcy that used to happen years ago of, oh my goodness, guys, take a look at that. But I don't look for the bragging. I don't want to be bragged about. I don't want to be the guy that everybody goes and looks at me. He's the best guy ever. I mean, okay, that may happen, but what I want is the same thing we all want, to be wanted and loved. That is the beautiful thing about life, and that's my goal. My goal isn't to be, listen, if it means I get recognition, okay, fine. But that's only material, because anyone can get recognized.
Sure.
The ultimate goal is to be wanted and loved, appreciated, understood, and to know that the truth cannot hide itself, and the only person who can tell his own truth is the guy telling his own story. Others can tell his truth, but it's not the same when it doesn't come from the horse's mouth. That's sort of my observation.
Yeah. And you're just so right about all of it. And it's just so fascinating to hear you recount all of these different stories over the years that you are recounting it all. It's just, it truly is fascinating, beyond every stretch of the imagination. It's absolutely fascinating.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I try.
And we just want to say that we haven't even gotten to this year yet, but I really got to tell you,
we're getting closer.
We're getting closer, and it's important to have these episodes at a certain length for people each time, because if we go too much longer, then we'll lose, some people.
Exactly.
Well,
you'll lose interest, and you'll have people going,
Right.
You know how people are, right? They'll get uninterested and they'll be like, okay, we've heard enough already. Turn him off! Oh, God, why are you doing this to me?
Right, absolutely.
Yes, I have a mixer, and I think you just got that point proven if it's in stereo. I don't know if you heard that little sound switch between ear to ear just now.
Yeah,
but yes,
I have on purpose. Yeah,
it's cool. A Behringer ZX 302, by the way.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, man.
These are nice mixers.
Man. Well, I tell you what, we'll have to have you on. I don't know if many people are repeat offenders 3 times, but you're one of them, apparently. Your story is so in-depth, and you have so much going on that we're going to have to get you here back on part 3.
Oh, indeed. You pick the time, I'll go with it.
Well, good. We'll connect a little later today, but at any rate, though, I just want to say that from my heart to yours, thank you so much for joining us the way you did. And we are going to have to kind of leave it there. I think this is good for part 2, and I think this has given people a lot of wisdom and knowledge. And I think, as we say, the third time's a charm, right? So the third part will get all the way up to this year and kind of bring it all to a close for how you're living now, right? All right.
Indeed.
Well, that's good. Well, that's very, very good. So until then, we'll leave it there in sort of this time frame and things like that of spring of 2024 when all this strange stuff happened, and things like that. But until then, of course, don't hang up, by the way. But until part 3, we hope you enjoyed the first 2 parts of all this victorious train wreck here. I have a suspicion this is going to really have an impact on people's lives. All this information and knowledge you're giving is really going to be impactful. So until then, though, until part 3, thank you so much. And we look forward to part 3. So there you go.
Indeed.
So until then, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.